Welcome to Flat Earth Debate Uncut and After Show. I'm your host Nathan Oakley, and if you are new to this channel, or you've not done so already, then be sure to subscribe, hit the bell notification icon and join button if you'd like to become a Nathan Oakley 1980 channel member and keep up to date with the Flat Earth Debate. If you would like to support the channel, there is a super chat that runs alongside each of these shows while they premiere, and there's also a PayPal, Patreon and crypto link in the info box below the video. Speaking of Patreons, I'm going to do a quick shout out to all of you who do support me on Patreon, so a massive shout out of thanks and appreciation to More Books, Cannabear, Fibre Oats, Bogey, Michael Kahn, Rob H, Ben White, Maximum Gravy, John Kays, Patrick Gunnels, Banter, Will Brax, Mel B. Styles, Troy Shuker, Hairy Blade, Mobile Max 777, Neo the One, Lost Cat FE, Rob W, Open Minded, Reese Pound, Del West Watson, Muted, Maria Neeland, Unbelievable Productions, Blue Ridge Ranger, The Real Gabster, Liam Nedrick Jr., Abraham Mohammed, Adrian Quintana, Skeptic 936, Life is Short, Texas Mike, and David Wayne Foster. So another massive thank you to all of you for supporting me on Patreon. Also, a big shout out to all of you who have supported my GoFundMe campaign over the weekend. So I launched this just before the weekend, and already I'm about just under a third of the way there in terms of my goal. I still have no idea how much I'm actually trying to achieve, as I haven't actually got any communication back from B&W, although I sent off an email to their service department out in North America on Friday and spoke to somebody at their British headquarters on Friday, and a couple of days after an auto response, nothing yet. So hopefully today or tomorrow I'll get something back and they'll tell me how much it's exactly going to cost. Lots of trolley comments, which is always lovely. People assuming that I've intentionally damaged my speaker so I can do a GoFundMe campaign. Absolutely not the case. And as stated in the video when I first launched the campaign, if there is any surplus, I'm definitely going to absorb it into the general running costs of the show, as it's been a couple of terrible months, as is always the case in January and February. More importantly than the trolley trolls, who assume I would absolutely definitely not go out of my way to smash a tweeter just to do a GoFundMe, ludicrous notion, being without hi-fi. How dare they even assume such a sacrilegious statement? Anyway, a few shout outs to the people who did support the campaign over the weekend. So there was a couple of anonymous donors along with Robert and E.E. Grimes. I'm not entirely sure if Lucas got an official shout out, but I did shout out the other few people who contributed before my last shout out. So if you did get a shout out indeed before, you get another one now. So shout out to Aaron and Lucas, obviously E.E. Grimes, the couple of anonymous donors, and Robert, who supported the campaign over the weekend. I will drop a link in the what would it be? It would be the live stream chat for the premiering stream and the comment section of this video in Nathan Oakley, or if indeed I release it on Nathan Oakley 1980 channel. If you're members, a couple of you have already supported me. Thank you very much indeed. Obviously, there's no obligation to anybody, but I do appreciate the support, as when anything that I do have goes bang, as is the case with these speakers, I don't have the money to cover them because I'm such a small YouTuber and do this full time. So the support that I ask for, I'm very grateful. I'm not embarrassed to ask for it, and I do receive it, and I can only say how privileged I feel to be in a position where people do support me. So there we go. Thank you very much to all of you who have done so. With that, I'm going to probably hand over to whoever is in Discord and Google so you can enjoy their dulcet tones while I set up for today's live show.
That ends it right there. I throw my hands up.
Thank you. What a waste of time.
What do you got? Some slides?
Well, I do, but I think it behooves me to save it for the actual show.
I'm just so happy we're back on normal time.
Has any globe proponents explained why they have two orthographic models for the, there's this flat Earth celestial sphere, and then there's the orthographic model that tries to justify a sphere in relation to that flat Earth model?
Yeah, I was wondering that myself. I've got to be honest, I had thought about that. Why is it that they've got a model that's got a tangent? They've got three. You've got a tangent-based Earth curve, you've got a tangent-based plane, and you've got a celestial, what do they call that one? Just the celestial plane? Equatorial plane, right? So you've got three models. One that gives you the geometric physical sphere edge horizon, like Al Bruni is using in this diagram. One that's more akin to the way he got the height of the mountain, right? It's just meeting at H on the ground with a flat plane derived as a claim to be tangent from the point you're standing on. So that's two different versions of this, isn't it? One that gives you're the tangent point, right? The flat plane just extends out in all directions from wherever you're standing. That's what we'll use and measure. Nothing to do with the sphere, but it's a tangent. Then they go, well, no. Here's a second model. It's the Earth curve model. And it puts the tangent at the horizon. You go, okay, there's two. And then equatorial plane in the centre of the sphere Earth. And you can link the two together and say, well, the one you made off the tangent plane is actually moving to the centre of a presupposed spherical Earth because all the light's coming in parallel, blah, 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 blah. Right? But that's three models, all of which use flat planes.
Yeah, but the only one that they adhere to is the center of their presupposed globe, because the celestial plane is identical to the equator line, and the angle can only be achieved when you cut the presupposed globe in half to have it a plane in the shape of a disk. And all angles in the Nautical Almanac are emanating from the center of Earth, not the surface. So it's the lines up the surface are for the complementary angle to the one from the center, which no one's at with a sextant, by the way, because sunlight comes in their model parallel, which is wrong because we know it comes in divergent. So they lose on all fronts.
Well, no, they adhere to all three, but all three are contradictory to each other.
That's why they lose on all fronts.
Right.
We never took them through all three, though. Brian got close once, or Brian, a combination of me, and he was pointing out when someone was trying to assume the tangent plane at the point that you're standing on, that they'll be using the other tangent point for the geometric horizon dip correction at a later date. So they'll just change where their tangent point is at whatever juncture they need to make it work on a flat plane when they're doing celestial navigation. I mean, none of this is actually done in celestial navigation. This is the frustrating part. While we're arguing with fundies about things like, moving lines to the centre of a sphere Earth, working off an equatorial flat plane, that's not done in celestial navigation. None of that's done. It's like, why are we arguing about this?
The only thing done in celestial navigation is an angle measurement with an angle measuring device called the sextant. And you need two straight lines meeting at a common point to have a vertex. And it's done at the surface of the Earth where the sextant is used. They show that surface being the center where it's flat.
Well, what I was going to get to is surveyors use a tangent plane, which is just the equatorial plane if you were standing at the North Pole. So the equatorial plane is a concept of the tangent plane if you were standing at the geographic North Pole of a sphere, that you could take angle measurements from the surface. You know what I'm saying? It's just, but then they rotate that tangent plane to explain changing zenith positions. Instead of rotating the sphere above them, they rotate the plane.
I'll post a pic for you, John.
But yeah, you can't rotate a plane. That's contrary to the idea of a plane. So that tangent plane doesn't work with the idea of converging zeniths.
You can't have converging zeniths. It just doesn't work. They've got to be parallel for this method to work. It's got to work on a flat plane. That's why it frustrates me when they start detailing things like converging or diverging zeniths. You're like, well, that isn't how it's done, and it wouldn't work if you did do it that way. No, here's how it does work. If I beg the question of an equatorial plane and then draw a tangent out from my position and then assume that all the light runs parallel, it would work like that on screen now. Good timing. It's like, well, but that isn't how it's done. It's just done with a flat plane, parallel zeniths. That's how it is done, as opposed to this nonsense of how it could be done if it was a sphere, and we decide to draw out tangent planes on top of the sphere that aren't being used for the measurement.
Yeah, it wouldn't work even in that, like that description that they give it. It wouldn't work because then they're denying what we actually measure, what geodetic surveyors measure. Well, that they're going outside of that and saying that the plane has nothing to do with the ground when surveyors measure the plane.
And
Yeah,
navigators navigate it. So they say no when they're navigating on the plane and measuring on the plane and getting angles from the plane. That's nothing to do with the ground, nothing to do with the surface. What they actually mean, to paraphrase, is it has nothing to do with their sphere surface because it doesn't work with the sphere surface. It works and operates on a plane. And when they're building stuff on the plane, that's surveyors, that's what they do. They just build on a plane. When they say it's not the surface, that's ludicrous. It's just not the globe.
Right. That's the because they want to take you to a point at your feet that only touches the globe at your feet and travels out and has nothing to do with the ground. But if it's at your feet, it has everything to do with the ground. That's what surveyors utilize to build structures on the ground. It's madness.
Nathan, I got a few slides up in Master B+. Elijah has a message. Please accept G+. I don't know what that means for him.
Okay. Just give me 2 minutes, 10th. Sorry, talk amongst yourselves. I've got to finish pressing buttons. I haven't.
Yeah, John, so what you're saying is when they have that mobile tangent plane on the globe model that they show us, and it moves with the observer to different parts, that's what you're talking about, right?
Yeah, but that doesn't work because that's not the tangent plane that's being utilized by surveyors. They're using a different tangent plane at that point.
Right, but that's how the pictorial or the picture is showing in the orthographic view, that they even have what do you call it, a dome over it. I have one with a dome, so it's the it's the limitation of the view of the observer, and so it's got this dome over a disc, kind of like a snow globe, and it moves on the outside of the sphere. That's what you're referencing, right? When you're
Which slide do you want
this.
But
You can go with the first one, which is the guy on the tangent plane over the Earth. Do you see it?
Yeah, I've got it up.
Yeah. So I think, John, do you see this slide in Master B? So is this what you're talking about? So that keeps moving on the outside of the sphere on a curved surface, but they can't get an angle from a curved surface, so they need that tangent plane to achieve an angle, which cannot be achieved from the curved surface. But it's actually emanating from the center. But in this picture, they don't show that. Space FM at the bottom. So this is what I think John's talking about.
is that the one with the globe and then a line on top of it?
Yeah, with a guy figure on it. It says
Yeah, that's the one where they try to move the zeniths to the center of the Earth. But I was actually talking about the tangent plane that surveyors use and what we actually measure.
All right, well, let's see if we can touch on that, because I think it's pretty much the same thing here, but maybe a different way that you're saying it. Next slide, Nathan shows where it's actually coming from their books. It has to come from the center because that's the equatorial plane equal to the celestial equator, the equinoctial. And you can see here they even got a telescope there, as if a telescope ever gets there. Of course it doesn't, but they need a flat surface to do it. The next slide shows a beautiful image of the celestial sphere and the Earth and the celestial equator and the Earth's equator in the red shade. And then you've got the yellow as your elevation angle, and it's going right through the Earth to the center, which is the way the books are gauged to work. So you can see an angle, and you can see it's not coming from the surface where the sextant is when the navigator is using it. So this is a joke. Next slide shows a protractor classifying angles, an acute angle, an angle with a degree measure less than 90. We know that you must minus everything from 90. So it's obviously a right angle triangle that your elevation angle is within, and then you minus from 90, and the leftover amount is the co-altitude, the zenith angle, times 60 is your nautical miles. Next slide will show just the snow globe version of it. No Earth under this one. This is like at the center, basically. You're at the center of the Earth here. And it shows the zenith above the observer. It shows the altitude and the azimuth, the bearing from north in a clockwise motion. And this is not at all what happens on the surface of a globe if it's curved. This looks like it's working on a plane. And it must, because Sextant is an angle measuring device. And another shot of what they have. A little different version of it, but pretty much the same thing. That's supposed to be coming from the center. We go past Elijah asking to join. Is that it? I think that's it. Unless there's one more.
Yeah, that's what I was getting at. But the snow globe one you called it, right? That's the one that surveyors use. That's how we kind of experience the world. It doesn't mean that the sky's a dome.
Right.
That's just how we measure it. That's the arc of perspective. And reified into an orthographic view, it's a reification of what we see, right?
That's the arc of the protractor, right?
Right. Then they have to take and build another reification to tie Earth curve to that reification. So they're like 2 reifications in before they can even address reality.
Yeah. Lots of reifications.
Very good. Thank you, 10th.
You're welcome. I got a few more, but did Elijah get in?
Yeah, I think so. I let a few people in unless he's just specifically. No, there he is. Hey, Eli. Hey, how's it going?
Good morning, guys.
Hey, how's it going?
How you guys doing?
Very
Good
well.
Monday
How are you?
morning. Really good, really good. It's cold as ice.
You ain't shitting, Eli. I'm afraid to get out of my car right now.
It's 23 degrees. It
you
was
sound
just
like
60s.
You sound like a foreigner.
Yeah, it's foggy here this morning. Freezing cold. Now it's clear blue skies. Absolutely idyllic.
No one got cold as ice by foreigner.
I got that pun, 10th. I got it. Cold as ice.
No, that's why I laughed, because that's what the song I had in mind.
Yeah, well, you don't realize.
Nothing like a foreigner pun to kill the conversation.
Well, I have some more slides coming up. I'll get back on the subject here real soon. All right. Right after Eli's slide, Nathan, you see, tell me when you see planet Earth is divided into 4 hemispheres, half a circles. Okay, so you got the Western Hemisphere, the Eastern Hemisphere in their model. And you could see that line in between the equator. And you cut that on the right side. You got the North Pole and the South Pole. So this is how they reference everything when they try to take this beautiful plane we live on and put it on the sphere. The next slide will be how the quadrants look. Very similar to a compass. But there's the 4 quadrants, and those are all 90 degrees, 4 of them, 4 90 degrees there, right from the center of that circle, which they interchangeably use and say it's the center of a sphere, but it's not, because it's a circle. Next slide. Here's that same circle in yellow, and here's that area with a 90 degree in the square box, which would, there's the arc John was talking about, the field of view. I could put a protractor over the same area, and that top half would be a protractor arc, and the red line would be the bottom of the protractor all the way across that equator line there. Next slide shows a cutout of a 90 degree. what it would look like in the center with the 3D look. But again, you need straight lines, and you can see how that box picture came into view before. You see all the little squares there showing the 90 degrees. But it can't work from the surface, so they have to go to the center, and it still doesn't work there because of the diverging zeniths. Next slide is pretty busy, but let's look at it. You got zenith, hour circles, declination, polar axis movement, etc., etc. But just notice that base. It's a disk. Celestial coordinates take some getting used to. The declination arrows all point north, south, toward and away from Polaris, while east and west are perpendicular to them. An equatorial mounted telescope will move only in these directions. Diagram from All About Telescopes by Sam Brown. So basically EQ mount, and this is what they're showing how it works. What is the EQ mount? Right ascension, declination. Equatorial mount telescopes need a flat plane to work on. That's why they can't be working off a sphere. It says it right there, basically. Next slide. We're showing you the EQ mount telescope with a little funny figure in the middle. But he's not in the middle, he's on the surface of the Earth. But they're telling you something else with their doublespeak. Why would they draw pictures like this? If the Earth's a sphere, why isn't there a curved surface under the sky?
Because it's not.
All right, next slide. This is it right here. There's one of the quadrants right there, 90 degree above the observer, 0 at the horizon. This could be changed over as well. It could be 90 at the horizon and 0 on top, depending which way you want to do this.
It's good little back and forth. So I'm going to go from this picture with 0 at the horizon, 90 at zenith, right? And it's describing this angle coming from the guy's eye to his horizon. Does this in any way correlate to being matchable with the centre of a sphere Earth as described in the yellow circle? Because that's what he's got. Line out to the horizon, 90 at his zenith. That's the arc of the protractor, if you want to call it that. But that diagram is him looking out at the horizon. It's not him looking from the centre of a sphere Earth. But that's how it works.
Yeah, exactly. Next slide, kind of showing this meridian that the sun is on throughout that one day. In this picture, you can see a flat disk with a little island with a palm tree, and your cardinal directions are there, northeast, south, and west. Why not a sphere? How come you're not showing me a sphere here? Because we're not on a sphere. Oh yeah, you can see that little red line and the sphere kind of fading underneath. But why do they have those arrows emanating from the center? And why do they need a flat surface somewhere on the sphere to get the angles to work? Because they can work on the surface where it's curved baseline. It's a trick.
Welcome to Flat Earth Debate Live. I'm your host Nathan Oakley, and if you are new to this channel, or you've not done so already, then be sure to subscribe. Hit the bell notification icon and join button if you'd like to become a Nathan Oakley 1980 channel member and keep up to date with the Flat Earth Debate. If you would like to support the channel, there is a super chat that runs alongside each of these shows while they are live, and there's also a PayPal, Patreon and crypto link in the info box below the video. Most importantly, if you'd like to join the discussion, simply mute the page you are currently watching, then click the link in the info box below this video to join the panel and express your views on the nature of Earth. If you do join, please don't swear. If you do, you'll be ejected, and if you are, please don't try to rejoin the stream using sock accounts. You'll be warmly welcome back on the next stream. Please also share the show on social media. Sharing the show obviously increases the live audience, but this in turn increases the chances of a more diverse panel, so please share the show on Facebook and Twitter. Now, before I introduce all of our guests, I'm going to say a quick thank you to all of the people who've supported my GoFundMe campaign. So a massive shout out to all of you who have supported the campaign so far. I don't think I have as yet in this live stream put a link to this, but I will. So I'll grab that link and stick it in the live stream chat as the show is going on. But if you have supported it, massive shout out to you. Greatly appreciated. With that, I'll say a huge warm welcome to Mitchell from Australia, 10th Man, Eli, I don't know where John's gone, but massive thank you to John for disappearing right while I was doing the intro, and a warm welcome to everyone in Discord as well. Welcome, one and all.
Morning.
Morning.
Morning,
Good afternoon.
Hello.
Good evening. Yep.
Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you may be. Good to have you all. Thank you for being here. Any evidence of a physical geometric sphere edge horizon, formerly known as the curve of the Earth?
Definitely not. Not since January 1, 2020, anyway.
Oh.
Hello, I'm back.
Hello. Any evidence that you can acquire an elevation angle from a curved baseline?
No, impossible. Sextant is an angle measuring device, and it's two straight lines meeting at a common point to form a vertex. You must have a baseline, and you must minus it from 90. So how in the world do you get a right angle triangle on a curved surface? Impossible.
Yeah, it must be a flat baseline, flat horizontal baseline. That's what they keep telling us.
Hey, Mitchell. See you.
Hey, Owen, how are we, mate?
Feel good. I just wanted to be stick in the mud again and say, like, look, dude, when you're using an optical instrument, you know, light's actually going to be bent, but it works out because eventually it's going things that you are measuring are going to present themselves like a flat plane. So it doesn't actually have to look like a globe for the instrument to work, right? It doesn't have to work through the geometry and the straight line versus the globe, because effectively, if you're using an optical instrument, everything's just straight. You're just using that flat plane, that seeming optical flat plane. That's all you need.
How does the protractor base being level help you with that argument?
I'm sorry, I don't understand.
Start the show yet?
Well, at least that was.
Were you saying something about Were you saying something about a bent line?
Yes, he was, yeah. Mitchell's just tweeting what's going on.
So I understand how this works, but I just want to pick your brain a bit, Baldwin, if that's what you're playing at the moment.
All right.
What kind of refraction are we using? Like, is it refraction to an object, or is it refraction to a celestial object?
Mitch, I almost did a little sound effect with your first question. You've immediately won. That's why there was a pause. Don't just chill. Let him answer. Feel free to ask again because I've interjected.
What sort of refraction are we using that, Arwen? Baldwin?
Refraction based on the radius value derived from the equator length of Earth.
Oh, that's a shame, isn't it? Because we get the radius from the elevation angles with a flat plane. You need a flat Earth for that.
Well, that's what we thought at first before we discovered terrestrial refraction.
You still got terrestrial refraction. So when you discover terrestrial refraction, where's your R come from? Do you have to discover the R too, which you can't achieve without that flat Earth baseline?
Well, you can still achieve it. You just can't measure it optically. That's the problem, right? But we can still derive it from equator length, right?
He's already covered that. No, you're not going to do-si-do him round. You've already covered that. He's just covered it. Elevation angles to Polaris. He's already covered that, Arwen. Come on, be reasonable.
I'm sorry. Who's this Arwen you're talking to?
Oh, right. I'm going to do shout-outs. I'm sorry, Mitch. You beat him twice. The fact that he's now going to snap into, well, I can just rinse and repeat 5 times. I'm not going to allow it. You won. You beat him. Yeah, terrestrial refraction derived from an R value you either get from elevation angle measurements to Polaris or from a geometric non-horizon that's refracted. Yeah, you're not getting R to give us a derived value. You can't measure it. You already conceded that. He won.
That's a straw man. Both the examples you gave, I did not use. I said derived from the equator length, right?
Yeah, where do you think
That's
that came from? He covered it. Let me just shout
From
out
the
these super chats.
celestial lights above us.
Oh God! Let me just shout out
Yes.
these super chats, then you can take it up again with Mitch if you want to do that. Shout out to Paul Connell. He says, "Big shout out to Arwin's Flat Earth Early Bird Show." Woohoo! Indeed, you do. Subscribe today. ARWIJN. I'm honoured to receive a wrench today. Thanks, Arwin. Oh, isn't that sweet? And thank you for the super chat, Paul. Really appreciate your support of this show as well. Hopefully you super chatted Darwin. Shout out to Godzilla37 who says, shout out Refracted. Thank you very much, both of you. Really appreciate the support. Right, yeah, feel free, Borwin. You have it out with Mitch if you want to carry on this nonsense. Terrestrial refraction.
Good morning, guys.
It's just like, oh, you always have to, flat earthers always have to straw man the ballers about, oh, you derived it from Aristophanes. Yeah, we know, Aristophanes. It's doesn't account for terrestrial refraction, right? And the horizon, yeah, we know it's not geometric, right? That's the inherent problem of terrestrial refraction. But we can still derive it from the overall equator length, which are again derived from sun positions and all that. So there's still something we can hold on to in order to establish the radius. You just can't really measure it using visuals anymore.
Third time's a charm.
So when you say,
go on, Mitch.
so why are you still going with terrestrial refraction? Is we're using a sextant here, an angle measuring device. Is when we correct the refraction after using the sextant, is that terrestrial refraction we're correcting, Arwen? Baldwin?
Well, that depends on what they're going to end up with specifically, right? As far as I know,
Doesn't depend.
The surveyors actually use the locally flat plane system, so they don't really have to account for terrestrial refraction bending everything into that flat plane. They can just think of it as a flat plane, so they only have to account for actual refraction, which is technically almost insignificant, but you still have to do that if you want to be perfectly accurate.
Surveyors are using sextants now, are they?
Hold on, forget the sextant bit. He just mentioned about them using flat planes. Focus on the major bit.
I was trying to go in a
Seeming
totally
flat
different
planes.
direction.
It's
What do you mean
seeming
seeming
flat,
flat? Yeah,
planes,
so-
not actual.
Yes. So it looks flat, so we have to treat it as flat.
Measured flat? What do you mean treat it as flat, seeming flat? It's measured flat.
Yeah, but that's the seeming part, because when you measure it, you use optics, so it's basically seemingly flat.
Yeah. Sorry, as Baldwin, Arwin, do you not feel embarrassed that your current rhetoric is to basically just agree with us? Because even it took a few moments for Mitch to even recognise that you were being a baller with these arguments, because essentially all of these arguments are you telling us how flat it is.
No, I'm ascending above that contemporary flare of victory that you may have just because things in your mind are as they seem.
As
right?
measured.
That's the whole...
What's this as they seem? No. Measured.
Measured using visuals. You didn't. You didn't.
So we're looking at it, measuring it,
didn't.
and it's flat. And you're saying, well, just because we look at it and it's measured, it's just how we're looking at it. Yeah. None of that helps Ball at all. I know that's their rhetoric at the moment. You didn't put a ruler
to that flat plane, did you? You just measured it visually.
What flat plane? The one that's supposed to be a sphere?
Yeah, exactly.
It is a sphere. It just seems.
I didn't know that. Did you put a ruler to
that? No, you can't.
Oh, okay.
So it doesn't seem very bally. It seems very flat. It doesn't measure very bally. It measures very flat. But you're clinging on to the, well, that's just because it looks that way and measures that way. Doesn't mean it's not a ball. That's crap.
Yes.
I mean, that is their rhetoric at the moment, are we? No, I appreciate you've not got much to work with.
That's true.
Yeah, but it is what it is, you know? We can't use optics to measure things because optics does not account for terrestrial refraction.
Meanwhile, we do use optics to measure stuff and then we build stuff. Or we do use optics to measure stuff and then we navigate. So while you might just decry how these things are actually done, they are done on a flat plane using optics, I'm afraid, Arwin.
No, that's just locally.
Did you
just locally flat
at the end?
Buildings are not so big that they all encompass the horizon. They never are, buildings are never like so big that they'll get to your horizon, right? So they just use the locally flat mechanism, just like surveyors.
Thanks. Welcome to Flat Earth.
Locally
Yeah.
flat.
So flat then. Yeah, thanks. This is what we're getting from the opponents. That's why they are more thin on the ground than they've ever been. Because to come here and try and argue celestial navigation means that they have to, somehow, weasel in a sphere in a flat Earth process. That's the long and short of it. Any evidence of axial rotation of the Earth-based variety?
You need a flat plane for that too.
I'm sorry, I still don't see how I didn't win that argument as Baldwin.
Yo, what's up, Mitch?
Hey, Chocolate.
Maybe tell us how you did win it.
Well, it's simple. I basically made you realize that you can't use optics for the measuring of Earth, right?
No, wrong. You told me that, insisted maybe as a baller that was the case, when I then pointed out that we do measure them and we do navigate the surface. So what, just completely McToon syndrome, right? Just stick your head straight in the sand, pull it out again and repeat the same crap. Like,
no.
What I said didn't matter. Yes, we do measure it that way. Yes, we do navigate it that way. Yeah, we do exist on a flat plane, and we have to deal with it as such. That's a fact. You saying, it's just optics? No. The buildings, the stuff on the surface, Arwin, the navigating of it, that's all done with a plane. That's just how it is.
Yeah, but it works fine because of the locally flat system, right? As long as it's measured with rulers physically and water level and all that, plumps, right? As long as it's measured flat, then, yeah, the architecture has no problem. But, yeah, if you're going to put it on the wider... Can I finish, please? Flat Earthers always interrupting me, right?
You're interrupting him telling us how flat it is to be able to build stuff. My bad, Arwin, and Baldwin, sorry.
Meow, 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 meow.
Please continue telling us how flat it must be, Arwin. Go ahead.
Yeah.
As Baldwin.
Right. Yeah. It only has to be flat locally, right, with the architecture, because otherwise you're going to have bent architecture, which is very difficult to achieve. So it's locally flat, but on the wider scale, when you're looking at the horizon, there's always going to be the optics factor, and that's where terrestrial refraction actually comes in. So on the wider scale, you can all treat it as if it is flat, but technically, if it's big enough, it's not flat anymore. Terrestrial refraction applies.
Please. You're just rinsing and repeating. This was covered 10 minutes ago by Mitch. So no, if you're using terrestrial refraction, then you're going to be deriving it from either elevation angle measurements or a measurement to the physical geometric sphere edge horizon, as per Al-Biruni, neither of which are open to you. Terrestrial refraction leaves you with a paradox that you can't fulfill. You need to measure an R value to claim terrestrial refraction, and you cannot. And any measurement that you do claim will come from the same methods that we use with flat Earth to get them. So when we do get them and do claim them as sphere, and then point out that they've come from a flat plane, you say it's just optics. Yeah, but you're using the same things to then claim it's a sphere, Arwin. So you've got nowhere to go, and we've already covered this.
You keep strawmanning me with these outdated arguments. We don't consider the horizon geometrics, and we can't use optics to determine terrestrial refraction. Stop strawmanning.
No, you can't use optics to determine terrestrial refraction because it's a mathematical derivation of an R value that did use flat Earth optics to get.
Yeah, sure.
Yeah. Right, let's move on.
Thanks.
Any evidence you can have gas pressure without the necessary antecedent of a container to press up on, and shout out to Godzilla37. I'm not going to miss any of his super chats, goddamn. Gas pressure without a container, you're going to need a flat tyre for that. What? Thank you very much for the super chat, Godzilla.
Well, technically, you don't need gas pressure without a container because the second law of thermodynamics doesn't apply to the atmosphere.
Atmo what now?
What atmosphere?
Atmo what? Atmo what? Atmo means air. Air what?
The gas that surrounds the ball Earth?
The ball Earth that you literally just told us has to be measured flat. That
Only
one.
optically measured flat.
Oh, only optically. Okay.
Right, but since gases are invisible, it's not really relevant whether the Earth seems flat or not in order whether like the atmosphere, whether terrestrial I'm mixing up here, whether second law of thermodynamics applies to that. Like the visuals are not relevant to that.
Air's not in sphere shape.
Yeah.
There's no sphere shape to air. Air, inhomogeneous, anisotropic mixture of gases that are unbonded, don't arbitrarily form sphere shapes. They take the shape of their container, not the shape of a sphere arbitrarily because you've got a sphere Earth that you've just told us comes from flat Earth measurements in all respects.
Yeah, but fluids have a downward factor, right? Vector. There is no problem. Gases don't expand in all directions.
But gas is not liquid.
No, not liquid, fluid.
Yeah, you could use fluid to describe gas and liquid, but gas is not liquid.
Well, it's not that hard to overlook that part.
Oh, sure. We can just overlook that. Okay, Baldwin.
Okay, so gas is not going down, go boom, boom like solid bonded bouncy balls. Again, gas is expanding to fill its containment. It expands in all directions, all vectors. It does not go down, go boom, boom. Now, equivocating this gas in a hypercompressed state and calling it a fluid, and then saying, well, I can describe it as being a bit like liquid when I hypercompress it. No. Number one, that's not how gas is existing in nature. And number two, gas in any state will expand in all directions, all vectors. That's what gas does. It's gas behaviour. Ergo, if the sky was a vacuum, that would be a vast availability of space. Oh, what do you know? They call it space, don't they? Well, then the gas would fill that space because it expands in all directions to fill the availability of volume it has, as per the second law of thermodynamics, aka entropy. Any more on this subject?
Could electrostatics create a containment field?
Do you want to show me gas pressure without a container, Arwin?
Electrostatics makes gas go down, go boom, boom?
A high pitched at the end because you're asking it as a question of me?
Yes?
No, gas does not go down, go boom, boom.
Surely you must have a demonstration of this, and I'm still waiting for someone to give us a demonstration of gas going down, go boom, boom because of electrostatics.
Well, it's a bit difficult because, gases tend to be kind of invisible, so I can't really show it to you.
Red herring anyway. The question is whether or not you can have gas without containment. The antecedent consequent relationship that is gas and gas being in a container to have pressure, showing a violation of that, to show that it's possible in any way, shape or form. Throwing out a red herring in terms of whether or not electrostatics can achieve that. It's like maybe they can. But can they achieve it without containment? Because that's all that matters, because there's a claim that there's a vast area of space, called space, that's an area of volume for our gas that we all breathe to fill. We're breathing high-pressure gas. So how do we have gas pressure? Well, what's the antecedent consequent relationship to have gas pressure? Containment. So we must be contained. What's that they say? Oh, no, there's a vast area that we could just travel out to as astronauts. No, that's a complete lie and violation of natural law. Who cares if electrostatics or whatever can make a gas do something? It doesn't make any difference. Unless you can show it without containment, because that's what's claimed to be the sky vacuum from the heliocentric priests.
I'm sorry. As Baldwin, I only understand atmosphere dynamics.
But there isn't any atmosphere. There is no such thing as atmosphere. It's an oxymoron. Air is not sphere-shaped. Any scientific evidence of gravity as we're talking about gas go down, go boom, boom?
No, still need a flat plane for that.
Well,
Playing for
It
what?
depends on what you think gravity really is, you know?
As to what
Flat
it
planes
is?
You would think at this point we would know what it is, being that it's like the whole heliocentric model is based on that. So why don't you know what it is, Baldwin?
Well, you know, the problem Newtonian mechanics has been very handy to basically provide a playground in order to set up the heliocentric model, but it's already been admitted that it technically doesn't exist. And yeah, the alternative so far has been kind of conceptual and impossible to physically prove in any way. So, yeah, what do? You know, we're still like Newtonian physics dependent, but yeah, it's kind of worn off. It's like we got this band-aid that worked really well, but it's kind of disintegrating, you know? We got to find some kind of gravity soon. Otherwise, this heliocentric model is going to be like too outdated.
Well, let me know when you find that. Meanwhile, while I hold my helium balloon that's trying to go up. Thanks.
Another shout out to Godzilla37. He says Richie believes this money is wasted, but he also believes he's on a spinning wet ball rocket. So who cares what he believes? Thank you very much indeed for the super chat, Godzilla37.
Yeah, just pick your gravity, whatever the flavour of the day is, but we just want scientific evidence for it. Doesn't matter what sort of gravity you're asserting. Just give us scientific evidence.
Okay, but we have to.
Well, he already conceded he doesn't even know what it is. If you don't know what it is, I mean, first you'd have to have an observation of it. So then what? You have an observation of something you don't know what it is? Or you don't have an observation at all?
Any single viable hypothesis from any of the fields of astronomy, cosmology, or astrophysics?
Well, they would have to have them. Otherwise, how would we be able to use email and laptops?
That's technology, not science.
Baldwin, does science prove things?
That depends on who's asking.
Chocolate's asking.
But Nathan, that housekeeping question directly refutes gravity right there.
Which one? Yeah, you're right. If you ask for a viable hypothesis and they haven't got one, then they wouldn't have one for gravity.
For
right?
astrophysics, yeah. Mm-hmm.
You did just ask Arwen a good question, though, Chocolate.
The science prove things, Baldwin, sorry.
Right. Well, that depends on who's asking.
Nah, the scientific method doesn't depend on somebody asking a question. Definitely not that. I just want to know, does it prove things?
Was that a nod to science buddies, Arwen?
Sometimes, yes.
Was that a nod to science buddies? Ask a question. Depends who's asking is kind of a... Was it a subtle nod to science buddies? The like top result if you ask what science is to Google.
That's kind of what I heard too, yeah.
Right. Well, no, but it also, in discussions, it matters, like, what is the inquiry, right? What is the science about that's supposed to be able to prove or disprove?
Well, you can take that as read because of the arena, right? We're dealing with the physical and natural world. We're talking about the nature of the world, most specifically. So when we talk about science here, we're talking about natural science.
Okay, well, that doesn't really prove anything, right? It's only the science that applies to widely recognized models like the atmosphere when it proves things.
Okay, let's just establish our Baldwin's position. Baldwin saying natural science doesn't prove anything. Feel free, Chocolate.
Because it's always changing.
Your name's not Chocolate.
Sorry, I got a coworker talking to me. Give me a second.
Need one of those little banners that says intermission.
I got an elaboration, right? Why
sure you
doesn't
have.
natural science prove anything? It's because things are always changing. But things that don't change, like the model of atmosphere, that's actually quite stable. So science does prove things concerning that because that model never changes.
What an outrage.
The nature, however, and our understanding of it is constantly changing.
No.
So what we thought was proving something before might turn out not to be proving something afterward because we figured out another model that rearranges the entire scenario.
Give Chocolate another couple of seconds, and if he doesn't respond, I'll rip that to pieces. We'll see how Chocolate goes.
What I'm basically saying is that only the science of models proves things.
What an outrage.
No, guys, go ahead. I can't talk for a few
That's
minutes.
all right. Okay. So, no.
I take your
Hypothesis.
concession.
No, it's how I'm going to rumpus me now. No. When you establish your cause of an effect through systematic experimentation based on a hypothesis, you have validated the cause. There is no changing the cause. If A, then B. Once you've established that A causes B, it will never be any different. Ergo, you prove things with science, Arwin.
Yeah, but what if other factors are different, though? Then it might not work like that anymore.
Then you didn't isolate an independent variable. If other factors were a contribution to the effect being induced, then you didn't isolate an independent variable. Ergo, you didn't adhere to the scientific method, so your methodology would be flawed. That wouldn't be the fault of the method, science, or the fact that it proves things. That would just be your ineptitude when it came to following a method.
But what if you can't isolate a variable because you don't know it exists? And you misplace your understanding of the variable onto the thing you're trying to manipulate.
Yeah, okay, I heard. Science has got you covered with a null. So you're saying you've got a phenomena, something's occurring, and you're trying to figure out what causes it. And you don't know. Now, at that point, you don't necessarily appeal to it not existing at all because you know the phenomena does occur. You just haven't figured out what caused it. But that would be if A, your presumed cause of the effect, not B, you vary it and it doesn't cause it. Well, that would be you proving the null. You validate your null hypothesis. If A, not B. You proved that to be true when you vary that which you assumed would cause the effect and it did not. So science has got you covered. No matter what the outcome, if you have performed a hypothesis test, that would be an experiment in scientific vernacular, you always, without exception, prove the null or prove the alternative. Okay? So you will be proving something if you're doing science.
Right? But it's still going to be based on current moment understanding, right? Because in the future...
It's not based on current understanding. It's based on manipulation of a presumed cause of an effect to see if you can cause it. Not on current understanding.
Yes, it is. So, for example, if you introduce heat with water to make it boil, right, which is considered science, well, what if in a later stage heat is not considered as it was before, right? What if heat actually is defined as something else? Then the original hypothesis no longer is true.
No, that's untrue also. Whenever you formulate a hypothesis, everything that you define within that hypothesis must be defined rigorously. There is no ambiguity in terms of what you're discussing, detailing, varying, and manipulating. It's all tied down. So there is no ambiguity. You have to be hyper-specific about what you're doing and what you're saying and what you're going to be performing. More importantly than anything, the semantics of what you vary matters not. Only that what you vary, your independent variable, that which you assume causes the effect, is varied and does cause the effect. That's all that matters. How you term it is irrelevant.
Hold up, wait, did you just say that maybe one day we might redefine heat?
Yes.
Oh, okay. That's ridiculous.
He hasn't got much to work with. He's saying science doesn't prove things, a la anti-flat earthers. So what's he got to work with? Science, matter of fact, proves things. In fact, it's all it does. If you perform the method, all you do is prove something. Either if A, then B, that would be an alternative hypothesis validation, or if A, not B, that would be a null hypothesis validation. So validation in both instances, you're proving something either way.
Right.
But it's only going to stay in a certain way if it's a model, and that model isn't changed, because our physical understanding of physical reality does actually change over time. So even though you've defined something rigorously within the experiment setup, it might later turn out that the very thing we thought it was that we were manipulating isn't actually that. And so the entire model, which it wasn't because it was natural science, is then disintegrated. And that's why science doesn't prove anything unless it's a model.
Sounds like you got a faulty model.
Models aren't science.
If science...
On John.
I was going to say, then there's no point in doing science because you can't prove things false either.
Exactly.
So no point in doing science.
Yes.
That's ridiculous.
Maybe.
Yeah, that's where anti-flat earthers are at. Well summarised, Baldwin. Reasonably concise as you can be when you're denying that science proved things when it's advanced humanity with the method of proving things. Just ludicrous.
It is
but that's
really difficult to argue that. I agree. It is really difficult.
But they do, because they've been tricked. They've been tricked into believing that pseudoscience stories made up about lights in the sky, along with second law of thermodynamics violation sky vacuums, is quote-unquote science. That's what they've been told. So they've been told science is in flux, science can change at any time, and it's just not true. Natural science is a method of establishing cause and effect. That's it.
It's a hell of a switch, because science used to prove the globe, according to them. So what the hell happened there?
What happened was we exposed that what they said was science and what they said was proving the globe. Number one wasn't science and number two wasn't proving a globe. And upon finding this out from us, they told us science doesn't prove things.
Well, they say that science only disproves things now, but that's still proving something false. So it's nonsensical, the statement that it just disproves. They don't know what they're talking about, and that demonstrates that they don't know what science is when they say things like that.
Any evidence of a self-perpetuating molten iron core at the centre of a presupposed spherical Earth?
Every time that's brought up, the baller in me is kind of embarrassed because there's just so little actual leads to that, you know? It's like the least talked about assumption of the entire model.
Hey, Sleeping Warrior.
Yo, yo.
You.
Any evidence of the R value, Earth radius?
Derived from equator length based on celestial maxim.
And flat Earth elevation angle measurements.
I got told that Blue Marble Science measured the R value. And I asked him, well, how did he do that? Because I know that the deepest hole ever dug is about 11 kilometers deep, 7 or 8 miles, whatever it is. And he said he did some shadow work and did some sums. And when I pointed out to him, that's not measuring, is it? That's calculating. He wouldn't accept it. He thought it was quite acceptable to calculate indirectly. He could indirectly calculate, and he thought that was credible.
Hold on a second. Hold on. John, did you want to take this up? Did you say he took some shadow angle measurements?
Yeah, that's a big Eratosthenes proof of a flat Earth right there. How do you work the baseline into being curved and get an angle?
It's the whole point about calculation that it is always indirect.
Hold on, before Baldwin hijacks this, did you pick up on what John just said to you, Sleeping Warrior?
No, I didn't have a chance to process it. Say it again, John.
Well, when he measured an angle using Earth as his baseline with his shadow cast on the Earth and the angle that creates, he curved his baseline to assume Earth was a sphere, but he measured it flat.
See, no,
that?
I think that's.
Do you
I think that's a
understand now, Anthony?
non-sec.
Do you follow what's being laid out?
Yeah, but I think it's a non sequitur fallacy because
No. Quite the contrary. What this is you and I will. You entered Flat Earth a little bit later than me, but nonetheless, you were around when I was being barraged with sticks and shadows, right? And then as we progressed through the argument, we realised that they're inserting R. You following so far?
Yeah.
Inserting R into what, Anthony?
The maths.
What's the maths?
Well, 7/6R. It's
No.
59,
No,
isn't it?
sticks and shadows. We're talking about sticks and shadows. So you're saying, I'll just take you through it. I'll hold your hand because I want the audience to understand this. It's very important. So they insert R into maths that they've taken. So prior to the R insertion, what have they measured, Anthony?
Well, they've measured an angle.
And how do they do that?
Well, they got the shadow or the well, whichever, and then they measured an angle with a straight vertical, and then they measured it out with a straight angled line, and then from there they made some assumptions.
So what you're saying is this process is as follows. First, measure angle on flat plane. Then...
See, no.
Hold on, you're disagreeing with me like I'm wrong. Go ahead, Anthony.
I think that's a non sequitur fallacy because just because you're measuring an angle, it doesn't have anything to indicate the shape of the Earth. You're just measuring an angle.
Really? When you're measuring a baseline, an elevation angle, specifically an elevation. What's an elevation angle, Anthony?
Well, it's two straight lines that has got nothing to do with... The map is not the terrain. The angle is not the terrain, is it?
What's an elevation angle? Not an angle, an elevation angle.
An elevation angle is the adjustment made for being above the surface of the water.
That's dip correction.
Oh, sorry. The elevation angle is the angle that's measured between the target star at the horizon or planet or sun. So it's using a flat baseline, but the baseline isn't the land.
So if I define it as, quote, the altitude angle, sometimes referred to as the solar elevation angle, describes how the sun appears in the sky. The angle is measured between an imaginary line between the observer and the sun and the horizontal plane the observer is standing on. End quote. Sustainable by design, altitude angle definition.
Yeah,
you
but
wouldn't
that
say
horizontal
that that's a
plane.
Horizontal plane because it must be in order to measure an angle, Anthony.
Is that horizontal plane physical or is it imaginary?
It's the horizontal plane you're standing on and measuring an angle from.
So you're taking that as an admission that just because it says a horizontal plane, that therefore means the Earth is flat?
It can't not be, because if it wasn't, you wouldn't get an angle, Anthony.
Yeah, but just because you think that the elevation angle represents the terrain doesn't make it so. I'm still just measuring an angle. Until
you build on it and navigate it. Then you can pretty much say that everything you're doing with the surface when measuring these angles on a flat plane is relating to the surface, how you build on it, and how you move about on it. So while you might infer that, well, just taking an angle, if I was just standing there with the sextant, you can't then infer that the ground is flat. Well, no, I can if I take an elevation angle measurement to 3 stars and then move around on the surface. Or I establish a horizontal plane that they sometimes describe as a tangent plane and then build on it. Then I can say it's flat because I've utilised the fact that it's flat to measure an angle and then move around or build on the flat plane that I just measured. Because I measured it and then moved on it. Simple.
Hold on. He missed something, though. He said it was a non sequitur. But your baseline is the Earth. That's where the shadow's being cast.
No. The baseline is just a line. An angle is just 2 lines meeting at a point. So when it's a horizontal plane, that angle, that line, is just an imaginary line in the same way that the imaginary line to the target for the elevation angle, that's an imaginary line too.
Hold on. But where is that line corresponding to in reality?
Well, it's either the target or the horizontal plane.
Yeah,
exactly.
And where is the horizontal plane? Is that the shadow or is that not an angle.
Is that the stick or the shadow? Which is
just an imaginary datum point, so we can measure an angle from it.
You're measuring something. Anthony, stop saying it's imaginary. When you physically measure. Hello. Stop saying it's imaginary. There's a measurement being taken, isn't there?
Yes, there's a measurement.
Right. So why do you keep saying it's imaginary?
Well, because you need two straight lines for an angle, and it says that the first one is an imaginary line to the target. So the second one must also be imaginary too.
No. That definition was in regards to an elevation angle measurement to the sun. This is just a stick in the ground, though, isn't it?
Okay. What's your point then?
So we've got two lines, one of which is a baseline. Is it the stick or is it the shadow, Anthony?
The baseline is an imaginary line, isn't it?
No, you measure it. We're going round in circles.
Listen, Anthony, what are you standing on? Imaginary line or the plane?
Where's the shadow?
Is
the shadow on an imaginary line, or is it actually a shadow on the ground? Your baseline.
Your shadow is a line, isn't it? It's an actual line.
Right, finally. So we're measuring something. Their measurement, Anthony, must have a flat baseline. Just geometrically, it's a fact. To do this and then insert R, regardless of your telling us that it's an inference, well, that inference that's taken with a flat Earth elevation angle measurement to get the angle is then taken as read geometrically to be flat to then insert R. So as much as any fundy might come and say, well, no, you can't infer the ground, well, you do. You measure it flat, the ground, and then take that ground measurement with a flat baseline to insert an R value. So they take it to be the ground, Anthony, which they later bastardise and bend with R, after measuring it.
The non sequitur fallacy, because just because you assume that it's a flat plane doesn't make it so.
No, Anthony, what you're doing is what the ballers are currently doing. They're using a bubble sextant for the artificial horizon that they imagine at their eye line, which must correspond with the Earth they're on, because when you use the marine sextant using the horizon, which is the Earth, you do dip correction and get your eyeballs on the surface of the water. Those are two parallel lines. So you can do it both ways, but it must match the real Earth when you do dip because it's parallel to the real Earth. So you're describing the bubble sextant with an artificial horizon, which they call the sensible horizon, which is the horizontal line emanating from their eye line. But when you use the horizon, the actual Earth, you do height of eye correction to get to the surface, which must be parallel because they both work with the same methodology. You must take the elevation angle, then get the zenith angle, divide that by 60, and then you get, multiply that by 60 and get your nautical mile distance. So you're on.
May I ask Anthony a question?
In the same way that a map is not the terrain, the angle is not the terrain either.
Can I clear this up? Go on, John.
I just want to ask him, do you think that an angle exists between the end of the shadow and the top of the stick?
Yeah.
Or do you think that's just a, what'd you call it, a non sequitur fallacy to assert that exists?
Well, the angle only exists if you measure it, right?
Right.
If you don't measure it, then there is no angle.
Okay. So there's an angle there using a flat plane.
Yeah.
But there is no angle to the sun.
Using two straight lines, not using a flat plane, using two straight lines.
A flat plane?
Yeah, that's
How do you have a straight line on a sphere?
Can I clear this up? Anthony,
yeah.
Do you realize that they have to use the GP of the sun, which means the ground position or geographical position of the sun? That's what the well is.
Just measuring an angle.
No,
hold on, this goes back to the question.
Hold on, Brian. Brian, we've gone on to sticks and shadows. Just hold that thought for a minute.
That's what I know that. I'm trying to explain it.
I want to do the same, Brian. It's just John's trying to do it with sticks and shadows, and I want to try and focus on that. I want to say that too, 5,000 miles in that direction.
I'm talking about Eratosthenes. I said well.
Oh, my bad.
Right. Anthony, they have to use the well, right? He's using the well where the sun is over, where there is no shadows, and that well is 500 miles away. So the baseline of the angle has to move. It has to be stretch along the surface of Earth.
Yeah.
The baseline, right, has to stretch along the surface of Earth for 500 miles. It's a right-angled triangle. It has to be straight. It won't work if the Earth is curving underneath it or anything like that. It doesn't work. It has to be straight. So you're measuring 500 miles along the surface of Earth from you, the observer, to that well, to the GP of the sun. That's a straight
I don't have
line.
a problem with that.
But you can't do that if the Earth is curved.
The problem is, though, the moment you start reflecting comparing the angle to the terrain, that's when the fallacy is committed, because it doesn't naturally follow that the angle represents the terrain. It's just an angle.
Yeah, but you're not worried about mountains or hills. You're making a horizontal baseline using the surface of Earth for 500 miles. You can't do that.
No, not using the surface of Earth. No.
Yeah, you're
using an imaginary line.
Hold on, Eli. When you say no, not using the surface of Earth, yes, that's exactly what's happening.
No, it's just an angle. It's just two imaginary lines.
Yeah, along the terrain. Anthony, in that demonstration, or claim to be proofsy, that is what is being done. Now, you can argue and say, well, to reify the angle between you and a well that's got a sun directly above it, that's not the land. Okay, fine. However, it is claimed to be measured as the land, Anthony. Ergo, this is a flat Earth proof, and if it's claimed to be a globe proof, then the first step must be accepted as a straight, flat baseline along the ground for it to be a valid angle measurement to move forward and insert R. So both... let me finish.
You said again.
Just let me finish. So, you and me don't have to agree that that reified angle as you describe it proves anything. No, but it's claimed to be an angle measurement that has been taken. And when that was taken, for both sides at this stage, it is matter of fact geometrically measuring a flat plane. It can't not be, it's an angle measurement. Now, beyond that, they then take that flat Earth angle measurement that you're denying and say, we'll insert into this absolutely established, perfectly flat angle measurement along the ground and insert R into it, or derive R from it. Yeah? Well, it matters not whether or not we argue about whether or not you agree with that angle measurement that is claimed to have been measured. That is a flat Earth angle measurement, whether you like it or not. Okay?
It's still only an angle.
Hold on.
It doesn't represent the terrain.
No, see, the shadow part directly ties it to the ground. Because where's the shadow at, Anthony?
The shadow's at the ground.
Yeah, so that's your baseline of this angle.
The baseline is just a line. It's not the ground. The reference point might be, but the line itself is still an arbitrary line that we call an angle.
Hey, I think you're missing the point. Okay. You're missing the point.
Your point is... No, his point is to say that you can't measure an angle between the tip of the stick and the end of the shadow, and that's just not true.
No, that's not my point. My point is that when you measure your angle, it bears no resemblance whatsoever to the ground below it.
So it's not using the shadow.
I can measure an angle off the back of a turtle's tortoise shell. Does it mean
you can't?
No, you can't. No, you cannot.
Because I've measured it.
No, you can't. Stop. That's incorrect. So you believe that the curved surface of a turtle shell meeting a straight line will give you an angle. That's incorrect.
No, the two lines that I use to measure the angle from above the turtle's back, the measurement of the angle with two imaginary lines, that's what gives me the angle. The turtle underneath has got nothing to do with the angle measurement.
Now you've got the shadow that's formed on a curved shell being an imaginary line. No, there is actually a shadow. It's forming a curve across a curved surface. That won't give you an angle, Anthony. Second time I've said it.
So, Anthony, for this to work, there has to be parallel zeniths. You can't have divergent zeniths. That means that the surface has to have a horizontal baseline. There's
Mike
no way
Jones says it's just an angle and you can do fuck all with it. Oh, really? Well, it's claimed to be an angle that's then utilised with an R value insertion after the fact to claim Earth's sphere. So the sphere has taken this angle and turned it into a sphere surface, Mike. So while you might decry this angle measurement, globe Earth is based on it. and as is a factually flat Earth angle measurement that they have taken and then used to bend into a sphere. You don't have to like it, you can deny it, but that is their rhetoric. They measured it flat first, they can't not have, they wouldn't have got an angle to then add in R afterwards. So whether or not you like it is irrelevant, Mike. Thank you for the super chat, though.
Well, that's the thing. With Anthony just admitted that the shadow is on the ground and you can measure an angle between the end of the shadow and the top of the stick. He has admitted that, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, but that's not
Now,
just an elevation angle.
Hold on. Yeah, I know, but that's the next part of it. Because you've established your baseline now.
No, we've just established a baseline, not the ground shape.
No, yeah, you have.
Oh, what do you think? Hold on, Anthony. What do you think a baseline is? What is a baseline?
A baseline is just your datum point from which an angle can be measured. In this case,
and where's it being measured from and to? Hold on, and where's it being measured from and to?
Well, the turtle's back to the
no.
Anything. It can be measured from anything. We've got two arbitrary positions, or two arbitrary lines that we call an angle.
Right.
But that's not an angle. What you're describing.
It is.
No. Let Nathan. No. Go back.
I know what the problem is,
Nathan. Because Nathan, go ahead, Nathan. Because we're talking about the elevation profile. It's not a shape, bro. It's in relation to the horizontal plane of the ground, starting from a 0 point.
Precisely, Eli.
To profile.
Exactly. And you're measuring it between two geographical locations. And what John's trying to lead you to say is once you've established a baseline, you're then drawing a straight line along the ground to the well 500 miles away.
Yeah,
that's along the ground.
It bears no resemblance to the ground below it.
That's what you're measuring.
No, you're measuring a line, not the ground.
No, Anthony.
A line along the ground, a baseline.
Yeah, but the line is arbitrary. It is a straight line, but it doesn't mean it's the terrain.
So the shadow's not on the terrain then?
It might be on the terrain.
And the well's not on the terrain.
The
well's, well then, Anthony, your argument is with this process. Now, regardless of whether or not you agree, disagree with whether or not the arbitrary angle measurement is along the surface or isn't, that is how it's being geometrically defined. So you're arguing against the process like it matters to me. I don't care. That's how it was done, geometrically measured along the ground. Whether or not you say, I don't care, I don't think that's right. Okay, no offence, Anthony, you are but one man. This is how it was done.
Anthony, hang on, Anthony.
I'm just pointing out the non sequitur fallacy to think that the line is the terrain, because it doesn't follow.
Not our non sequitur fallacy, it's the rhetoric they used to establish the surface to get an angle. That's what was done according to the rhetoric.
Oh, no, listen, this is the topography argument. Just because there's hills and valleys, it's not flat. That's what he's doing right now. It's the topography argument.
Yes.
I got it now.
Yes, that's what...
Can I go after 10th?
Thank you, Brian.
You can, Brian, hold on. After 10th, and after this super chat gets read out from Mike Jones. Also, you are going to give them a celestial sphere as well, Nathan, ? Who measured celestial as a sphere? No, that's a misapprehension about...
Tim Osman.
That's a misapprehension about what's being described in terms of the celestial sphere. You're measuring it with parallel zeniths, Mike, so it seems clear from your super chat that you don't actually understand how this process is done with parallel zeniths. That would give you a flat roof, as Brian would describe it. So while your perspective view of something moving away from you and moving towards the horizon could be described in an arc, but that's because you're getting two straight line angle measurements to it. The arc would be of the device you're measuring it with, the protractor or the sextant. Yeah, that's how the sextant was named. Well, that angle or arc isn't the arc of the heavens above your head. You've got a linear relationship with perspective with 1 degree every 69 nautical miles. Well, that relationship is along a straight line above your head, a flat roof. So there is no celestial sphere. Your misapprehensions of how this works is what you're displaying there, Mike. Thank you for the super chat, though. Really appreciate the support. Go ahead. 10th, then Brian.
Yeah. When you're using the marine sextant, you're aiming it at the horizon, and you do dip correction Why do you need to do dip correction, Anthony? Your argument, you wouldn't need to do it. But using the sextant with the Earth's horizon, height of eye must get to sea level to create that baseline, that 90. So you're wrong.
Yeah, Anthony, where you're going wrong is the difference between any random angle and an elevation angle. If I take a 60-degree elevation angle to a star over the horizon, then I subtract that from 90 to get 30. So I know then that 30 degrees that's left over from the 60-degree elevation angle is then the roof of my zenith angle. It's also known as a depression angle in geometry. I multiply that 30 then by 60 to get my nautical, which is 1,800, right, to get my nautical mile distance. But first that 1,800 becomes minutes of degree, a straight line across the sky between two parallel zeniths. That straight line across the sky between those two parallel zeniths must match down at the bottom of those parallel zeniths because they're parallel. Whereas what you're talking about with turtle shells and stuff like that is diverging zeniths. So that distance in minutes of degree can never go one for one as nautical miles. So if the process, the point is that to do the process of using elevation angles, what you're really looking for, well, not what you're looking for, but part of what you're looking for is the multiplication of the zenith angle. And that gives you a distance across the sky that's then transferred down one for one, 1 minute of degree for 1 nautical mile along the surface of Earth. The Earth cannot be curved for that to work because that will diverge the zeniths. There is no way around that. Now, you can do that on the sea and put your baseline, the height of eye, onto the sea, right? And that means you have a straight line along the surface of the sea, which is geometric straight line along the surface of the sea for whatever distance, right, you get from your angle. But the same thing is happening in the sticks and shadows, but you just don't need to do height of eye correction because it's already, the vertex is already on the ground. You're already on the vertex of the angle is already on the ground, and the GP is 500 miles away. So that means the baseline of that angle is traveling for 500 miles. And that's what Eratosthenes proved, and that's what he measured. And it's after this fact you add all. And for Mike Jones, the celestial sphere doesn't exist. It's a perspective thing. You need to think about diverging zeniths and parallel zeniths too.
With that, sorry to cut you off, I'm going to say a huge, massive, enormous thank you first and foremost to all of you in the live chat for smashing the super chat, liking, commenting, sharing, subscribing, and all that good stuff. Stay tuned if you're watching on either premiering stream, as there will be an after show to follow. Another massive thank you to today's Discord and G+ panels for making today's live show possible. I've been Nathan Oakley. Stay tuned if you're watching on a premiering stream, and I will see you all in the next video.
What a lovely day!
To say, yeah, what you're doing is actually non sequitur, Anthony. Not what you claim is non sequitur to the point of an angle. Because again, the line is parallel with the surface, which has an elevation profile of flat. That's like when Globers tell us, yeah, well, we don't live on a 2D pancake. Yeah, no shit.
Yeah, Nathan, are you back?
I am, but I liked what Eli just said to Anthony, because he's like, elevation profile being flat from a reference from 0 is something that Anthony can relate to, because he's drawn out enough elevation profiles in Google Earth Pro to know what that means. And when you're talking about the ground position below the star, above any position on the ground, your elevation angle is only in reference to that box that you used to draw out, which was all flat. And suddenly it can't work if that line along that box in the elevation profile curves down, because suddenly the position of the star above that position doesn't match anymore. So it has to be flat. Not only does it have to be flat for the matching of the positions, you can't measure an angle anymore if it's curving away from you. It's not an angle anymore.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't actually have a response to that. I can't think of a baller response to that.
Well, let me
see how good Anthony is. Anthony is so much better than Baldwin at playing playing the frustrating, annoying part of the devil's advocate argument. I know he understands this, but he can piss me off quicker than Baldwin can.
Nathan, can you go to Master B and start with the Sean Hawkins response to Brian's video that he did? I have several slides that follow. I wanted to do this in the live show, but we missed the opportunity.
No, you don't multiply the zenith distance by anything. You multiply the elevation angle by 60 after you correct for dip. You've been told this at least 1,000 times. Why are you incapable of learning or understanding? Is that the one?
All right. So I saw this as his response. We're going to take this individual to task. Go to the next slide. Zenith distance from the sun's GP. By measuring the angle between the sun and the horizon, you can easily work out how far you're away from the sun's GP. The sextant allows you to measure this angle. Here's a simple formula. 90 degrees, sextant angle equals how far you're away from the sun's GP. Obviously a right angle, right? E.g., you measure the angle of the sun with your sextant, it reads 60 degrees. That would be the elevation angle, obviously. 90 minus 60 equals 30 degrees. We know there are 60 minutes in a degree, so 30 times 60 minutes equals 1,800 miles. Go back to the previous slide, please. No, you don't multiply the zenith distance by anything. You multiply the elevation angle by 60 after you correct for dip. Excuse me, go back to the second slide. You minus the elevation angle and the co-altitude, the complement angle, the zenith angle, all synonymous, is what you times by 60, Sean. 1,800 nautical miles. You don't know what you're talking about. We are 1,800 nautical miles away from the sun's GP. Go to the next slide, please. So that came from Dummy's Guide to Astronavigation. I thought perfect for you, Sean. Good clown noise. Next slide. So next slide shows what Brian ended the show with two zeniths, the zenith of the observer and the zenith of the star, the box. You can't have diverging zenith. That same co-altitude on top is the remaining of the elevation angle. So if you read this, 90 degrees, height observed, and then you've got minus 60, which is the elevation angle, leaving you 30, and 30 times 60 minutes is 1,800 nautical mile zenith distance, as this slide shows in this, showing also a circle leaving equal altitude, the GP, which is also known as the subpoint. And here you got it in the box that Brian perfectly describes. These cannot be diverging zeniths. It's a 1-for-1. The top and the bottom must match. Next slide, please. Go to the bottom paragraph. To determine the distance between our position and the GP, we subtract the measured sextant altitude from 90 to determine co-altitude, and then multiply the co-altitude by 60. Again, Sean doesn't know what he's talking about. The result is our distance from the GP in nautical miles. For example, if the measured sextant altitude was 61 degrees, that's the elevation angle, as might be measured near midday in summer from Puget Sound, Washington, you would be 90 minus 61, which is the elevation angle, leaving you 29, the co-altitude or the zenith angle, times 60 minutes, which is 1,740 miles from the GP. Next slide, please. The next figure shows another example of finding the complement of the angle. Angles and complements. What is the complement of 60? Since it must be minus from 90, the elevation angle is 60. So what is 60 minus 90? Let's see, I think it's 30. So what's 30 times 60? It's 1,800 nautical miles. Next, angles and complements. The figure below shows 90-degree angle between the vertical and horizontal lines, and also shows an angle of 30 degrees from the horizontal. 30-degree elevation angle in this case from the horizontal. That would be what? The horizon. And as for the complement of the angle, the complement of an angle is the difference, Sean, between the angle shown and 90. 90, the angle, in this case, 90 minus 30 equals 60. What is 60 times 60? Well, that's 3,600 nautical miles in this case. Next slide, please. Concept 4. Measuring altitude using a sextant. A navigator observes a celestial body in the sky and uses a sextant to measure the altitude of the body above the horizon. The horizon constitutes the horizontal reference line, and the measured angle provides indirectly the complement angle as shown in figure below. What's the figure below show? It shows a 32-degree elevation angle, leaving the rest to be the complementary angle, which would be 58 degrees. 58 times 60, 3,480 nautical miles. Next slide. This is Eratosthenes' angle, the measured angle of the sun's rays, and the coaltitude, also known as the complement, also known as the zenith angle. Next slide, please. In fact, it's very clear here. H, elevation angle measured up from the horizon. Z, zenith angle measured from vertical. Oh, that's interesting. That's also known as a complement, correct? Yes. And A, azimuth angle measured clockwise from north for bearing. Next slide. Again, shown here. The elevation angle is H. The coaltitude, the complement or zenith angle is Z. And that's what you times by 60, not the elevation angle, Sean. Here's another one, altitude and zenith distance. Here's 90 again, that's a right angle always. Zenith distance is the complement angle. Zenith distance is the coaltitude. Zenith distance is the zenith angle, not the elevation angle, Sean. Next slide, again, showing this picture again. How it works, Sean. You don't times the elevation angle 60. What was his statement? His statement was, if we go back to the original slide and we'll end it there. Let me get to it. One more slide. Here's Sean responding to Brian. No, you don't multiply the zenith distance by anything. We just read every citation saying you do. He says, you multiply the elevation angle by 60 after you correct for dip. Sean, every reference says you don't use the elevation angle. You use the complement angle. And he has the nerve to say to Brian, you've been told this at least 1,000 times. Why are you incapable of learning or understanding? Sean, I'm done.
Oh, projection. Yeah, why are you incapable of learning and understanding? Why are you projecting that onto Brian?
Yeah, I saw that comment. And there is the guy that the whole of the globe are hanging their hat on for a Polaris challenge. You know what I mean? There is the guy that's supposed to understand things, and he didn't even understand how to gain the distance from an elevation angle. He didn't even understand that much. You know, like, I can confidently say that basically everyone that I'm aware of on Bev's channel and Sean Hawkins and basically the majority of the Globers, not all of them, but the majority of them, don't have a clue how any of this works. Because I know, because I've been getting questions from them, you know, when they start trying to use a bubble sextant on a boat, they don't understand why you don't use a bubble sextant on a boat. One of them said, but you can use it for an airplane. That's moving as well. It's like, no, you're missing the point. You know, it's like there's a load of, I get nothing but questions right, off of, that are supposed to catch me out on something, or that are supposed to be clever, and all they show is the lack of understanding from the person. You know, it's like, so Sean is just another one. Sean deserves to get roasted for this, because someone's off mute there, Anthony. But Sean deserves to get roasted for this, because he is going around for years talking about this Polaris challenge, and he doesn't even understand how to gain a distance using a zenith angle. And for everyone who says an angle, you can do fuck all with an angle, it means they don't understand that the whole worldview they were handed, right, the globe Earth model, as Nathan said earlier, I would have said myself if Nathan hadn't said it, your whole worldview that you grew up in and was taught to you in school and is being taught to your children more than likely, that whole world, that globe heliocentric worldview, that's all based on elevation angles to Polaris. So don't tell us you can do fuck all with an angle, because you can build a whole worldview on it.
Exactly.
So
their worldview's built on those angles, and those angles having R inserted afterwards and deriving R from geometric horizons and elevation angle measurements also taken from a plane. So you say, well, if you're going to decry the angle, that's the globe side, then you're decrying the basis of your own model. Now, the basis of your model's flat. That's where we're at in the argument, pointing out how you can't decry this angle or say that it's not an angle or it's a non sequitur angle, because you're using the same angle. It's just you're taking a flat Earth angle and turning it into a sphere. We're just taking the angle and saying, there you go, there's us measuring an angle, and it's being used for navigating and building things. Now, if you want to decry that and say it doesn't mean it's not a sphere, it's like, well, show us how you navigate on a sphere without using that flat Earth. And the answer is you don't. So they can't deny it, they use it.
Brian, wasn't my low segment a proper roasting of this individual?
Yeah, it was excellent intent, and I hope that Nathan cuts it out, or else I'll cut it out, because once with Nathan's permission, because talk about someone who deserves it. And the fact he said you've been told 1,000 times, that means there's 1,000 other people just like Sean who don't know what they're talking about.
Every citation, every reference, everything. And this is the same guy who says, you guys just need to read the manual in the Sextant when you buy it and you'll know you're wrong. This is that same guy. He's taking the elevation angle and timesing that by 60 nautical miles, when every citation says it's the opposite. You take the co-altitude, which is the zenith angle, and that's the complement that gives you the zenith distance. He is so off. It's ridiculous.
Can I just point out as well that the elevation angles to Polaris, they don't work, because as Polaris gets towards the horizon, it slows down. Thanks, Mick West, for showing that. He completely ignores that. I've shown him the proof that it doesn't. The further away from Polaris you get, the lower in the horizon it gets. You've got the slippage. You've got to go 69 miles, 70 miles, 71 miles, and so on, the lower it gets towards the horizon. Regardless of what the cause of that is, it doesn't maintain that linear relationship, which is essential for his claim, and he still spews it today. He completely ignores that his claim is invalid in the first instance.
Yeah, well, I mean, the thing about it is that anyone who's stating that you can do FOI with an angle, right, and this is towards Bev, and anyone else who listens to him and follows it, means they don't know what they're talking about. They don't know what they're talking about. And that includes the Globers. They didn't even realize what co-altitude was, what zenith distance was. They thought a zenith angle was zenith distance and co-altitude. Like a zenith angle, let's say if I take a 60-degree elevation angle, then my zenith angle is 30 degrees. But that's just 30 degrees. I have to then multiply that by 60 to get my minutes of degree distance between the parallel zeniths at co-altitude. The zenith of the observer has to be co-altitude, which is complement to the altitude. Altitude of what? Altitude of the celestial body. So because I'm using parallel zeniths, I know that my minutes of degree distance between those parallel zeniths at the co-altitude will definitely become 1-for-1 nautical miles along the surface of Earth. Now, the ballers don't understand that part, and people over on Bebs don't understand the importance and strength of an angle. They don't get it. That's why they think you can do nothing with an angle. You know, so it's a sad state of affairs that we have people who are basically on the same side as us, even though they may not call themselves flat earthers due to splitting hairs. Who cares? Right? And ballers who don't understand any of this.
Nathan, I just posted a site on MasterB, but I also posted a part of that site in the slide. Can you go to that? This is talking about bubble sextant and how it's done in an airplane.
Yeah, sure.
All right. So obviously, bubble sextant is used on an airplane, but there's a method to it that doesn't match the same method that you do at sea. Number one, let's just read. The left half of the sextant carries the bubble and its culminating system, which together form the artificial horizon. At sea, you're using the real horizon. It also carries the left handle, which contains the dry battery or plug adapter and the lighting control switch attached to the upper part of the handle. The right half of the sextant carries the sextant proper, consisting of two mirrors, together with the gear for measuring their rotation, sunshades, the altitude scales, and the scale lighting lamp in the right handle. The scales on the right half of the section show the altitude of any single observation. The clockwork-driven attachment is connected to the measuring gear in the right half. There's no such thing in the marine sextant as a clockwork-driven attachment. Of the sextant, it gives you the average. This is why they need it. It gives you the average of the altitude shown on the right half of the sextant at 60 intervals of time, evenly spaced over a period of approximately 2 minutes, during which the observer follows the object to be observed in the sextant, maintaining coincidence with the bubble to the best of his ability. Now, what does this mean? Well, I've done research on it. I own one. It's called the A10. Basically, the pilot has to fly horizontally, longitudinally, as straight as he can. Of course, there's bumps, as he hits air pockets and stuff, but they do this for 2 minutes. The navigator must keep the bubble and the star sun as much as possible in the center of the bubble. And for 2 minutes, they take over 60, and it does this automatically, sightings. So divide 60 into 2, that's how many happens per, seconds apart. Then they take the average of this to figure out what you do with a marine sextant, because you are on a moving airplane. So that's how bubble sextant works, just to set it straight.
Right, and it takes us straight away from the ground, which is why, it's a nice argument when it took place with Zanuck, and they want to take it straight away from the ground. You're like, we're arguing about the ground. Out at sea, same principle, makes no difference. But you want to take it straight up in the air, do you, to establish a horizontal plane that's away from the ground, so it's less embarrassing. But ultimately speaking, this process, it doesn't really faze me in the slightest if Bev, as you put it, is in some way against this process. It's like the process is described as measuring an elevation angle, and an elevation angle is defined. If you want to take that and say it's just an angle, no, it isn't. It's a defined type of measurement that's used on the ground. You don't have to like it, that's what it is.
Yeah, it's good to have their books, their method, and teach it. And then the ballers, anti-flat earthers, get mad at us for teaching the books of the world, the method of celestial navigation. And they say, it's embarrassing. We got to change it up. We got to lie. We got to say this. We got to say that. To make a mistake of saying the elevation angle is what you times by 60 nautical miles, this guy should hide from public view forever.
I'm with John. As much as I think the sextant argument and the elevation angle argument in general is excellent, I think taking it to their original proof, with sticks and shadows, is absolutely brilliant. There's a certain level of acceptance about what's taking place in terms of the angle measurement in the first instance that they cannot deny. So if they take you through the story, same goes for Al Biruni. But I think Sticks and Shadows is that a little bit more eloquent and widespread.
Absolutely. I think it validates what an angle is, and it destroys them there, as well as the Sextant argument where they try to obfuscate and say stupid things. Because all you got to do is get a navigation book, and the ballers are embarrassed. Navigation books help flat earthers, not ballers.
As they like to jump around all over the place and obfuscate with various different tools, there's no reason why we can't fight fire with fire. Oh, you want to take it to the bubble sextant? Well, what about Alberuni? Oh, you want to take it to the bubble sextant? What about this well with the GP of the sun above it, directly above, and an angle measurement to it? They're all using the ground. They're all doing the same thing. Makes no difference whether or not you take this line up into the air. You've still got parallel zeniths in that example. So as far as I can see, this argument leaves them with absolutely nowhere to go. You're presenting if you want to get straight into it, Brian.
Yeah, I won't take too long with this, Nathan. This is the final straw that breaks the camel's back for the ballers. I'll show you what I mean. This came from people, like I put out this in this video. This is from my last video. But I brought this up 2 videos prior to that. And none of the ballers caught on to what it was, right? I'm just going to hopefully zoom in here so you can kind of see it, right? So here you have 2 angles, right, from this zenith position, right? First of all, to do this, I must give them their tangent plane, their equatorial plane, or whatever straight plane they need through the center of their globe. I must give them this angle to the celestial body, and I must also give them the duplicate of this angle from the center of the sphere, right? I must ignore the sorry, 1 second. All right. Right. I must ignore the distance to their celestial body, whether it be Regal or Polaris or whatever, right? And it's a light years distance. I must ignore all those things, all the arguments that I would have as a navigator, all the things I would argue about concerning celestial navigation and how the process of elevation angles, creating a zenith angle and a zenith distance with co-altitude is done. I must ignore everything. So if I give them absolutely everything, right, this is what they got, right? What they got, this orange line from the observer is their angle, right? The red line here from the center of the globe is coming out and creating the GP on the surface of the globe and going to the center of the celestial body. But the problem is this. They have 2 parallels going on here. The zenith from the GP, right, is a red line, and that's making a parallel with this orange line, which is the angle line from the observer. Now, they both claim to be going to the same star, blah, blah, blah. But this is the problem, right? The angle from the zenith here to the orange line is 56.43 degrees. But the angle, right, if you put another angle in and bring it to actually meet the zenith from the GP, because it's zenith distance from the observer zenith to the GP, the zenith from the GP, or the star zenith, right, or going to the star. So what they're doing in their final part of their process, they literally fail on the final hurdle after you've given them absolutely everything, because the only angle they have is the one they took from the surface. But when they change that down to the center of their globe, and that creates their GP, that means that their angle line from their zenith, right, taken from their zenith, will never reach the zenith from the GP. So they'll never have a correct elevation, a correct zenith angle, because their zenith angle can only be 56.43 degrees with the orange line, whereas their actual zenith angle should be 60.189 degrees. So they're just on this one angle alone, they'd be several hundred nautical miles out. And that's only the first of 3 angles they're going to take, maybe 4, depends on what they need. So straight away, at the very end, after I've given them absolutely everything, I didn't argue about it, and I gave them every single bit of what they wanted. At the very end, their model fails terribly. It's their model just absolute failure, because they can never then get a correct zenith angle. Because they kept on trying to claim to me that zenith angle is co-altitude and zenith distance, not understanding the process that we go through with co-altitude and the parallel zeniths, because they wanted to argue against parallel zeniths. So I gave them everything.
Don't mention 90.
90.
Right. Don't mention 90.
Don't mention the 90. Yeah. So I gave them absolutely everything, and then I show how at the very end, and I won't mind only they didn't even realize what I was talking about in the videos prior to this one. That's why they argued at this point with me, without even realizing what I was talking about. At the very, very, very end of their whole process, they fail. Their zenith angle will always be too short for what navigators actually do. So this would mean that celestial navigation wouldn't work on a globe, even if they had all this other nonsense. It would get to this point at the very, very end and fail.
That's good, Brian. This is one of my traps. I hope they bite. Because there is something here that they can say, and the minute they say it, they fall into the trap.
Well, I don't know I'm waiting to hear any of them say anything because...
Well, they don't own the books. They haven't read as far as I've read. There is something they do to fix what you've shown as a problem. But the minute they do that, they fall into a trap because it's a big one. What do you think it is? What do you think it is looking just at this diagram?
Well, if they have to add to their original zenith angle.
What do they need?
Oh, I know what they need. If you're talking about parallel light rays, is it?
No.
Right, because that's no good to them in this argument.
Is it 90?
What do they need?
They need 90?
No. Listen, might as well give them a break. I'll tell you the problem. I mean, it's too late. They've lost so many deaths already. No, they're going to need R. Because what they do is they do a lower limb of the sun. Then they do semi-diameter correction to take it to the center. Oh, center, you're going to need R for that. We're back to the black swan. You ain't got R. So center what?
No, but that doesn't. That even as a rebuttal wouldn't mean anything.
But that's what they're going to say. They're going to say, well, there's a calculation that we fix this because we fixed for semi-diameter and parallax. I say, great. You're going to need R for that because you're taking it to the center. Center of what? It's over.
No, that doesn't work for them, right?
Well, yeah, because they ain't got R.
No, because they have to use the sun in that position. They can't use the stars in the same way because that means they have to start claiming two-way speeds of light.
The stars.
No. Their zenith. Hang on. No. Their zenith angle can never be correct. That's the point of this. No matter what they use, it can never be correct.
That's not the zenith angle. They correct from the outer limb to the center of the sun, from the surface of the earth to the center of the earth. That's the semi-diameter and parallax correction they add. So they say, well, we took it from the surface, but we did the proper calculations to take it to the center of the earth. Center of what again? You ain't got R. You can't take it anywhere.
No, I think you're missing something here, Kent. They can never have, in this instance here, a greater than 56.43 degree zenith angle. They can never have a 60.18 degree zenith angle like they should have. This is my point. No matter all what you said, none of that addresses this. You can't, because of the process they use right within their mathematics, because this is all just a maths flow process. They can never have a 60.18 degree angle in this using if they have their original zenith angle at 56.43 degrees, it can never be 60.18. They can never start talking about that. What you're talking about, that doesn't solve the problem because they always have a parallel. Their measured angle is always going to be too short.
But their measurements coming from a presupposed center where there is the equatorial plane. They're never using the one from the surface. That's the math they use.
Yeah, but that's my point. This is my point. They start off with an angle on the surface and then they put it mathematically from the center of their globe, and that's where their GP is. Look, that's where their GP is, right?
Correct.
The zenith from the GP, right? Their angle line should be meeting the zenith from the GP to give them an angle.
So they're using it twice then?
Yeah, like
that's why they have the parallel rays.
No.
Go on, Brian.
Yeah, they have one angle from the surface. In reality, it's 56.43 degrees. But when they move that angle to the center of their globe, right, they don't have an angle to that, right, which gives them their GP. If you see here, GP, that is the zenith from the GP going out here on the red line. But their orange line, right, that will never meet that red line. So they don't have a correct zenith angle. So what's happening is when they move the angle to the center of their globe, they extend the zenith angle that they don't have, or sorry, the zenith distance that they don't have.
They're doing away with the zenith angle after the calculation that 10th is saying gets around this. No, it gets around your description of it by not having the angle look like it's being measured from the center, from the surface. They move it to the center first, but then they relinquish that zenith angle from that point forward. They can't get it. It will never match. It'll always be too short.
Exactly. The original zenith angle that's taken in reality, then in reality, you take a 56.43 degree angle to whatever star that is. But then when they turn it into a globe, or use globe maths and bring the angle to the center of their globe, their angle line then doesn't meet the zenith from the GP. So that means the zenith, whereas in reality, they have a 56.43 degree angle, but when they do this process here, that would give them a 60.18 degree angle. But the problem is they'll never have that zenith angle because their zenith angle can never be more than 56.43 degrees. They can never have this other angle.
To my understanding, they discard the measurement from the surface. They only go to the red one.
Yeah, but that's my point. This is
no, that's my point. I know, but I'm saying in order to do that, they die right there because they need R. They can't.
No, they die because they have an incorrect zenith angle.
They discard the incorrect one, is what I'm trying to tell you.
No, it
means nothing to them because they need it to emanate from the center. So they take it from the. You see, they just discard it. And because you're dealing with parallel zeniths, they're not.
You're right, 10th. I just want to stop it because you'll both get exasperated with each other. You are correct. However, what Brian's saying is, okay, from that stage where you would win, Brian's not dealing with reasonable people. So they still progress the argument further. Right, Brian? So they still persist. And what Brian's saying is, I'll give them everything they've offered up to date, and this is where we get to. So they've already taken it, as in this diagram, as you're describing, to the centre of the presupposed spherical Earth using R. And you're saying, well, that's where it ends, right? No. This is way beyond that for Brian. He's saying even when you go beyond that, and they still say, no, I push it to the centre of Earth, well, you can't do that. But let's let them and see where this goes. You end up with the zenith angle measurement being too short. Right, Brian?
Yeah, well, actually, it ends up being, if they use the angle from the center of their globe, then their zenith angle is greater than it is in reality. So it doesn't work. Because if I am within their process, it's actually the original angle is too short, but in reality, then their zenith angle is too big. If I zoom in here, you can see a black angle line and an orange angle line. And move in even closer. A black angle line and an orange angle line. The orange angle line would be the zenith angle in reality. The black angle line, it would be if you placed, right, if you had to extend or if you actually brought the observer's angle line to meet the zenith from the GP. My point is that their angle line never meets the zenith from the GP. That never happens. It can't. In this process, that can never happen. So consequently, they end up with a conflicting number. And in this, it's like 56.43, and they end up with is the original angle, and they end up using the angle from the center. They end up with a 60.18. Right now, I added that in. They only just have 56.43, and then they claim to use the center, but they can't because if they used the center, their zenith angle will be 60.18. So it doesn't work because that means that it's outside reality. We know there's 56.43 degrees or degrees across the sky, or a zenith angle. And if we multiply that by 60, it'll give us whatever. I'm just going to show it here, right? What's trying to show? This is, right, 56.43 multiplied by 60 equals 3385. right? 3,385, right? That's the actual nautical mile distance, right? Now, if we do 60.18 multiplied by 60 is 3610. So you're talking several hundred nautical miles longer that they can't account for in reality. They're basically, this process here, if you give them everything else that's in it, this process here, if you give them everything, the very last hurdle they fail on, because their zenith angle will always be wrong. If they're using a parallel angle from the center of the globe, that means the zenith angle, the reality zenith angle is 56.43. But they can't do this because in reality they'd have to use, if their reality was real, then that would change the 56.43 to 60.18. Can't be done. And that's, as I said, that's just the first angle. What about the other two? They're going to take the two other different stars. And that is if we ignore everything else. This is the very last thing, and it fails. Because this purple line here is what would happen if their observer's line met the zenith and the GP, which it has to. Every single celestial navigation book will state that this has to meet that. Why does it meet that? Because it's creating a right angle. If I just give me 1 second now, I'll just show you, right? Make it a little bit, right? Give me a line, right? This is two different programs, but I'll just show what I'm saying, right? Bring this out here to there, and I'm just going to get another line. Now, I'm going to go bring this bigger, right? Make this bigger so everyone can see it. Right, there is the right angle. This purple line here that I put in would be their angle line, right, to the star. But this is their angle line to the star, here, this orange line, and then that's in reality, and then they move it down to the center of their globe. So then you'd have to do another angle line to the star that doesn't exist. You understand what I mean? This parallel, and see how this parallel zenith here, or this parallel line here, which is the zenith and the GP, you're going to have to meet that for the process of actual celestial navigation. This is why it was a loss, I think, on a lot of people. They don't realize the subtlety of this, is that they fail absolutely at the final hurdle. There's no way around this.
Very good. Thank you, Brian.
You're welcome.
Excuse me.
Say again, Endless.
Yeah, that's me. Hello, everyone.
Hello.
I just had a question about the almanacs. Would it be possible to reverse engineer them to make a map?
I think it was done about 5 years ago.
Yeah.
Somebody got pretty close with, with doing exactly that. Was it Rob Durham that did that? Maybe Adam will remember. Somebody did do that, yes.
What did that map look like?
I don't know. I don't have it to hand. I'm hoping somebody will help me out from my panel and have a better memory than me, but nobody's.
Are you thinking of JC?
Yeah, that's what I was going to say, Tam. It's AJC put together the planispheres to make one individual one that worked. I've not seen anybody backwork to do an actual map, but AJC put together. I think there was one, maybe two stars that he was having issues with, but he managed to merge the two, so it was usable anywhere on the surface, and covered both north and south of the equator.
There you go.
Yeah. Yeah, he basically took all the different planispheres for the different, like the northern hemisphere one, the southern hemisphere one, and he put them all together into one planisphere. And like Adam said, he was waiting for intel from people who lived in different parts of the world to give him something to finish up the, I think, 2 or 3 stars that he had left before he can present. So it's just one planisphere, and you can do the same.
extreme end of the southern area. I don't know if I'd be any help.
Yeah. Well, Adam, maybe he had some people in the southern area, but they were still not, at that point, hadn't gone back to him. So it's interesting, though, because when they use Polaris, as long as they can see it above the horizon. Then when they don't see it above the horizon, they actually go to the sun in its circuit and where it is in the highest point in the meridian, noon. And they start using that as they get more south for actual. There is no south celestial pole.
Very good.
Does guy have a YouTube channel? What's his name?
AJC.
Mm-hmm.
Anybody know the full name of his channel?
AJCEE, I think.
No, it's A, and then it's A, but and then the next letter is J, but it's JAY. I'll dig it out now. Give me 2 minutes.
Yeah, he's got good material on it for sure.
So it's AJC, which is AJAYCEE space 1844. Look, I'll give you that again. It's AJAYCEE space 1844.
I'm surprised you had trouble finding him, to be honest.
Why's that?
Oh, sarcasm.
Oh, yeah, it's not an easy one to get to, is it? Do you need it a third time?
I'll get it.
Any more for any more?
Yeah.
Well, sorry. I must say, with all respect to Brian, he's taking a few steps more than I would take, but that's fine. Everyone can do it their own way. So I always love to do it my own way, too. But I would not let any of them beg the question that it's coming from the center of the Earth. I would say you need R for that, and you fail on that with the Black Swan. So no begging the question. It dies right there before they have any chance to do anything with it. We already know that a sextant is an angle measuring device, and it needs two straight lines with a vertex, and it's always used on the surface of Earth. And if the surface of Earth was the turtle shell or sphere, it would never work.
Yeah, this is going to be a tricky one, 10th. Yes, I totally agree with you. However, with Sleeping Warrior here, there's been several occasions where I've moaned like you've just moaned and said, why are you allowing them to beg the question? Only to have a certain amount of understanding be developed as a direct result of someone like Anthony begging the question of things like gravity. And in this case, Brian's doing the same. He's saying, okay, we understand that you've got to beg the question of a sphere, utilise an R value, transpose a flat plane from the surface that you call a tangent plane down to the equatorial plane at the centre to get the angle. Once you've done all that, where does it go from there? Now, I totally agree with you, but I can't say that's the best tactic, having seen great results from people like Anthony in the past from begging the question. I wouldn't do it. It would drive me nuts. And I moan at other people who do in like the same way you are moaning at Brian right now.
I'm not moaning at Brian. That's the point.
I'm moaning.
Definitely moaning.
How did I start my sentence? Everyone could do it their own way. I personally wouldn't do it that way. That's not moaning. That's preference.
Well, what I'm doing is kind of like the Black Swan. What I mean by that is this is kind of like the Black Swan for our sextant argument, because we had to beg the question for the Black Swan to be created, right? So QE had to beg the question and take the argument about the horizon and beg the question and formulate that argument, right? That's what you had to do to show how it doesn't work. How in reality, that process that they talk about measuring to a geometric horizon is nonsense, because the horizon is not geometric, it's optical, right? I go through the same process here where I give them absolutely everything, because they were going against me on every turn. And even though I had that argument out several videos beforehand, and I'd mentioned it in other videos, None of them caught onto it. I give them absolutely everything, then I show at the final hurdle how their globe completely fails. Because their zenith angle is going to be wrong. As soon as they mirror that angle to the center of their globe, it means they're not meeting the zenith from they're not meeting the zenith from the GP anymore. So that means there's a change in the distance in the zenith angle, right, which changes the distance. They cannot get around this. What you said earlier will not get around that. There is no getting around it.
Well,
can't you say if they take the angle to the equatorial plane, then every zenith angle must be parallel with each other? I mean, must be what is it?
Divergent.
What is it? Divergent from each other. Zenith angles taken by measurements are parallel. Therefore, they can't be taken from the equatorial plane. I don't know. Or take it to that.
This goes past that. This goes past that.
I've shown the picture how they do it. They use the airplane in the sky. They use the ship on top of the surface of the presupposed globe. Then they go to the center, and they have baselines at every one of those points, which is a horizontal line. And like I said, their big way they die is sun rays do not come in parallel. But because they get to say sun rays come in parallel, which they do not, they're divergent, that the angles all match, they complement one another, even though at distances apart. And then their excuse is because the luminaries are so infinitely far away that it really doesn't make a difference. So they have their way of getting around it.
No, they don't.
No, I'm saying they.
No, they don't. They don't.
Oh, gosh. Forget it.
This is the point of what I pointed out. You know the diagram where you have the airplane above the ship? And then the ship above the celestial horizon. You know that diagram where you have those three angles?
Yes.
Yeah, that's what I'm referencing.
Yeah. Just you weren't giving me any comeback there, right?
No, I said forget it. I'm done talking about it because you're not understanding what I'm doing. I'm saying go ahead and do it your way.
I'm trying to point out a flaw.
Okay, fine.
Right? The zenith angle that the pilot would take, right, if they were to use the angle that's taken on the ground, will create a bigger zenith angle, a bigger distance. That diagram is a begging the question fallacy for a globe. That's what that is. In reality, that doesn't work. Because the zenith angles are going to change.
That's my whole point. You're going to need a globe.
That was 10th man's point, Brian.
Yeah, but that's my point. That the zenith angles are not.
Well, then you agree.
That's my point.
Well, then you agree.
No, not
agree.
Exactly. No, we don't, because 10 thinks they have a way around what I talked about earlier.
No,
they don't have a way around it.
When I say they have a way around, you think I'm giving a strong argument that works. No, this is their way around. I'm describing it because when I do the research, I must report everything. And I'm reporting how they think they get around it. But it still doesn't work because you still need a globe.
With that, I'm going to say another huge, massive, enormous thank you to both Discord and G+ panels for making today's after show possible. And of course, a massive thank you to all of you in either Nathan Oakley 1980 or Nathan Oakley Premiering Streams for hopefully smashing the super chat, liking, commenting, sharing, subscribing, hitting the GoFundMe campaign, and all that good stuff. I've been Nathan Oakley, and I will see you all in the next video.
What a lovely day!